Welcome. So this is our first Torah Studies of 2025, and the Torah portion this week is Vayigash. We have an incredible class this evening, and we just have a phenomenal discussion. So here we go. I need to fill in information because we did not have class last week. I feel like it's very important to mention one key piece of information. So last week we read about in the Torah portion in the Parsha, we read about the drama that begins between Yosef and his brothers. So of course they're jealous. Why are they jealous? Well, he's got the coat of many colors. He's got his father's love. He's the son of his father's favorite wife, right? All the other brothers are jealous. He then proceeds to tell his brothers about the dreams. I had this dream and that dream, and you were bowing down to me, and and I'm the greatest. And they're all thinking, this guy. And then one day he comes to check on them in the field, and they say, let's get this guy. And at first they want to kill him, and then decide, let's not kill him directly. We'll throw him into a pit and let him die in a pit. And then they change it a third time. You know what? Let's sell him. Let's sell him as a slave. And so they do that. And that's what happens. They sell him as a slave. He ends up in Egypt. And of course, the drama continues from there. And the Torah tells us that at some point, the Torah portion of Miketz tells us that Pharaoh he's there in Egypt, and now he's working for Potiphar. He then gets thrown into prison. He's framed for a crime he didn't commit. And there he interprets some dreams. All of that is the Torah portion of Vayeshev. And then that was 2 weeks ago. Then Miketz is where Pharaoh has two dreams. And Pharaoh has dreams, and he needs someone to interpret the dreams. And so they call, who do they call? Joseph is one who interprets the dream. He tells Pharaoh is foretelling 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And of course, giving financial advice. What does he say? Save in the 7 years of plenty for the 7 years of famine. Yosef was the first financial advisor, right? He's giving some sound advice. Save in the years of plenty for the years of famine. Very good advice for everybody. Great.
Not for everybody, because everybody else that saved it brought.
Oh, that is true, right? The commentators say when the Egyptians tried to save, it didn't work. Only Yosef's grain, right? Only Yosef's grain was healthy. Well, in the meantime, as the drama unfolds, as fate would have it, so Yaakov sends Yosef's brothers down to Egypt to purchase grain, food.
Mine was one.
And even though he had his own stock, but he said, you know what, let's buy like everybody else. So what happens? And you imagine the scene. I've always pictured this a certain way. I can't describe it the way it's in my head. I've always pictured the story in a certain way where like there's this huge line. I kind of picture it like, by the Holland Tunnel, where you have all those like tolls and like there are all these different lines of people coming and buying and whatever. And Yosef is kind of like he's watching everything unfold, and he sees his brothers. And the Torah says he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. And the simple understanding is because when they last saw him, he was 17. He didn't have a beard, right? Kind of like Clark Kent and Superman. It's like, oh, you have a beard. I had no idea. Like, can you imagine if glasses make such a difference? The facial hair, right? Because he was, this is another, I don't know, 17 years. He was 30, 35 at that point. 33. Yeah. So another 16 years. And so at this point, Yosef decides to, and this is where it gets complicated. He decides to trick them. And the way he tricks them is by accusing them of being spies, accusing them of being not forward, not up front with him. He tells them they have to bring down their brother Benjamin. They say, we can't. He says, you have to if you want. I'm going to keep Shimon. I'm going to keep one of your brothers as a prisoner until you bring down the other brother that's missing, because only 10 came down. Of course, the 11th brother, he was, well, I guess Yosef was one, 11. The 12th brother, Benjamin, He was still at home. He says, you guys can't get any more food. You guys can't, you won't see your brother, Shimon, until you bring down Benjamin. And so they go up to the father. Father says no. And then eventually they twist his arm, as it were. And Yehuda says, I'll take responsibility. I'll guarantee the safety of my brother. And he says, fine. Okay. And they send Binyamin down, and all 11 brothers come, and they stand before Yosef, and they bow down. And now their dreams are coming true. Literally, 11 brothers bowing down to Yosef. They don't know he's Yosef. They're bowing down to the viceroy of Egypt, the one in charge. And meanwhile, it is Yosef. Great. And then Yosef pulls the final trick, which is after their meeting and after their meal together, and after he sends them home with food, he also has his assistant plant his royal goblet, which wasn't just a cup. It was a sorcery tool or whatever it was. I don't know that it actually was, but it was a magical goblet of Yosef, and he plants it in Benjamin's bag. And then as they leave, he sends someone to chase after them. They say, one of you stole the royal goblet. No, we didn't do it. Yes, you did. And Yehuda steps up and he says, look, none of us took it, guaranteed. If you find someone that took it, you can kill him, and the rest of us will be your slaves. And the assistant says, or maybe it was Yosef, even when they came back to Yosef, he said, Chas v'shalom, God forbid. No. Only the one who has it in his possession, he's in trouble. The rest of you are absolutely fine. Well, of course, they found it in Binyamin's bag. And at that point, everyone's devastated. They don't know how it happened. They don't know why it happened. They just know that it happened. The worst case scenario has just unfolded. The one brother that their father didn't want to send down is now the one who was literally caught red-handed in possession of the viceroy's royal goblet. All of that is last week's Torah portion. I wanted to make sure to go through it because we didn't discuss it last week, and I want to make sure that the sequence of the parasha continues. But I have to ask the following question: what was Yosef's plan? What was the agenda? What was the angle? And every commentary on Torah deals with this. Every commentary is dealing with the same question. What was Yosef doing by pretending he wasn't Yosef, by pretending not to know them? Why didn't he just say, the first moment he saw them, why didn't he say, hey guys, it's me, it's your brother? What was the whole game? What was the aim of the game?
He wanted to know if they regret.
So he wanted to know if they regretted what they had done. And in the course of this conversation, of the many conversations, they express regret, but it goes even deeper. Because if you recall, the jealousy was really not just predicated on jealousy of Yosef himself, but it was jealousy of his mother. Remember, who was his mother? Rachel, right? She was the beloved, the original wife the original girl that Jacob wanted to marry was Rachel. He saw her by the well. They fell in love. He wants to marry. He worked for 7 years for a hand in marriage. And then the old switcheroo under the chuppah. He marries Leah, and then, he marries both. And then the Bilhah, Zilpah, the handmaids. But everyone knew that Rachel was his beloved wife. And she had 2 sons, Yosef and Binyamin. And Yosef wanted to know one question. If they had a chance to get rid of Benjamin as well, would they take that chance? Would they take that opportunity? You with me on the question? Mm-hmm. If Yosef, if he could orchestrate a whole series of events to give them the opportunity to say to their father, lost another one. Sorry. Whoops. We tried our best. He broke the rules. He's a ganef. He understood that they might still carry the same enmity, the same jealousy that they had toward him as being the son, the child of Rachel. They probably also had the Benjamin, right? Would they also sell out the younger brother? And here we see Vayigash Elav Yehuda Vayomer Bi Adoni, right? This opening of this week's Torah portion. Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and we're going to explore Rashi on this. That Yehuda, Judah, approaches Yosef. He doesn't know he's Yosef, but he approaches the viceroy, the second in command of Egypt, the most powerful nation on earth at the time. And he says, my friend, we have to have a serious conversation. He did not, they were not going to step away from their brother. They were not going to walk away. And that is ultimately what didn't break Yosef, but that's what Yosef wanted to hear. And it was after that Yosef said, Ani Yosef ha'oravichai. It broke the charade. In other words, at that point, that's what he wanted to hear. He wanted to hear, because Rambam says something amazing about tshuva. Tshuva is repentance. But what does tshuva really mean? So tshuva means answer. Tshuva also means return, because answer is a response. Tshuva also means like this. So we typically say tshuva means repentance. Question is like, so what is repentance? So is it saying, I'm sorry? I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. The Rambam says, and we've shared this many times in different classes, that it's easy to say, I mean, okay, it's not super easy, but it's relatively easy to say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. You know what's harder? To not actually do it again. It's easy to say I won't do it again. It's harder to actually not do it again. How do you know you've done tshuva? As Rambam writes, I'm just using his language. I'm not trying to be crude here, but he says, if you have the same opportunity with the same woman, but you don't make the same choice, then you know that you have done tshuva. Again, he's assuming that there was something immodest going on, and the person says, I'm not going to do that again. But if you have the same opportunity, the same scenario, it presents itself, but this time you make a different choice, then you know you've done tshuva. Look, if you take someone out of a certain context, right, and you put them into a different context, and in context A, they had one set of behaviors. In context B, they have a different set of behaviors. So, and it's improved. That's great. But that's not necessarily tshuva. Tshuva means that you can come back, you can return to the same place, the same person, the same scenario, the same trigger, the same, whatever, but make a better choice the next time. That's when you know that something has changed. Look, you can change the scenario, but that's not changing self. Changing self means I'm in the same scenario, but I am different. That's the power of tshuva. So what Yosef wanted to do is put his brothers into a tshuva moment. Let's put you in a scenario where you can easily sell out your brother again. Another of Rachel's sons, the second of Rachel's two sons. You can easily sell him out. He stole a cup. Dad, your first kid from Rachel got devoured by Torah, got ripped up by wild animals. The second one was caught stealing. Thank God you have us, right? Thank God you have us. The 10 brothers of 10 sons of Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. At least we're holding on strong. Leah, Bilhah, yeah, right. So at least you have that. That's what he wanted to give them the opportunity. And of course, they didn't do that. They said, we're not leaving without him. We're not going to sell out our brother. We're not going to walk away. And he said, okay, so they've changed. So clearly they've learned. Clearly they've grown. Clearly they are different people than they were 16 years ago when they sold me out as a slave.
They had more reason with the jealousy of the Pope.
Yeah, but at the core.
Felt more for their old father.
Yeah. But I think that's part of tshuva. In other words, difference, right? But I would imagine that the baby of the family but I would still say that the fact that, look, I think they were older, they were more mature, they cared about their father, which they weren't thinking about 16 years prior. They were not actually thinking about their dad.
They saw the father suffering in 16 years too.
There's a lot of maturity. And that's part of tshuva. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the opening verse of the Torah portion, which I set outside, and then we're going to look at Rashi's commentary, and it's going to be, I think, very, very eye-opening. Okay, so here we go. 1 second. Let me pull this up over here. All right. Jose, please read text 1a, opening pasuk.
Judah approached Joseph and said, please, my master, allow your servant to speak a matter into my master's ears. Let your wrath not be kindled against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh.
Thank you. Okay, so Judah's approaching. Now, why is Judah approaching? Judah has become the de facto leader of the brothers. If you recall, it was Judah who was the one who told them, let's not leave this young man, our brother, to languish in the pit. Let's sell him. He was the one who we had a class 2 weeks ago who went up to shear the sheep. Remember, he had his own drama with Tamar, but he is the one who took responsibility for Benjamin's safety. And so Judah approaches. Now, if remember this, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Judah. He's the fourth born. He's not the firstborn. He's the fourth son of Leah. So he doesn't have the natural, there are no natural circumstances that are making him the leader. He is the leader because he's the leader, because he steps up and he says things and he rallies people around him, for good and also not for good. He was the one who said to sell Joseph as a slave. Okay, that wasn't necessarily a great thing, but nonetheless, he definitely demonstrates this ability of leadership. Okay, so let's see what Rashi says. Text 1b. Jose, please read this one as well.
And Judah approached Joseph, a matter in 2 master's years.
The quotation marks in the English and in the Hebrew are what we call the Divrei Maskil. That means the header of Rashi. Rashi's commentary is the way it works always is he quotes, he cites a verse or a word or two or 3 or 4, and then he writes us a few words of commentary. And so here he quotes. Let's just pay attention to the words Vayigash elav, which really translates to and he approached him. But in the English, yes, it just instead of using the pronouns, it just says dot dot, right? Little bit unstable here. All right, but we're back. Okay, I'm going to share again. Okay, so Rashi again, simple. Rashi quotes a few words from the verse, and then he explains seemingly we can this. What do you guys think?
No.
Rashi. Here's the problem. What is Rashi the meaning of? Because the verse itself says that Judah approached Joseph. He said, please take a matter into my master's. That's and Rashi says, may my words enter your ears. Isn't that what the verse I want to say? It doesn't seem to be adding much conversation that he's saying that he's going to speak into his ears. The question is compounded by another reality, and that is that and this goes back to one of the rules of Rashi that we almost need to know before we proceed. One of the rules of Rashi is that Rashi will always explain a turn of phrase or an unusual phrase the first time it appears in the Torah. Like if it already appeared and he didn't comment on it, the likelihood of commenting on it later is very low, because if there's a problem, he should have addressed it, and he would address it the first time it's mentioned. Does that make sense? Okay, which leads to the following problem. And here's what I mean by when I say the following problem. If you take a look throughout Torah up until now, there are 4 other instances where the Torah uses that. A little bit weird that the so let's look at it together.
Before, were the ears that were entered or Pharaoh's, like Pharaoh's real high up?
Well, no, so we'll see. There's a few instances. One instance of speaking into someone's ear. One instance is the instance where Avram, where Abraham is wheeling Ephron to negotiate the sale of the Ma'arat HaMachpelah to bury his wife. And the other one is where Avimelech, who was the king of the Philistines, of the Philistines, where he was telling his people not to start up with Abraham and Sarah. This is before she passed away. I feel like every time, just to, the Zoom issue, I think every time I'm sharing the screen, it's crashing. So I'm not going to share the screen. So you'll just have to take our words for it. All right. Toba, please read text 2a. Text 2a comes from Bereshis, from Genesis 20, verse number 8. And this is a little bit of context. I mentioned it a second ago, but let me give it context. Abraham and Sarah, Avram and Sarah, were traveling. The Torah tells us about their multiple travels. They went to Israel or Canaan, and then they went to Egypt because there was a famine, and then they went to Gerar by the Philistines because there was another famine. And basically, along some of these journeys, Sarah keeps on getting abducted, right? This was a common theme, that Abraham tries to hide her, and then she gets abducted, and then things don't go well for the abductors, and then they let her go. So this time, Avimelech gets very, I think he got sick. He got very sick, and God appears to him and says, the reason why this is happening to you is because you have this woman, you have to let her go, and you have to return her to her husband. So that's kind of the message that happens. They did not know she was married, correct? Because they said, oh, she's my sister. Correct. So, exactly. So, right. So Hashem, basically, God warns Abimelech, return her and don't touch her. And then the next morning, this is what happens. Take away text 2a.
And Abimelech rose early in the morning and summoned all his servants and spoke all these words into their ears.
Into their ears. Aha. So this is not the first time in Torah that we've encountered the phrase, speaking it to someone's ears, right? Avimelech gathered all of his people, all of his servants, and told them, don't touch this guy, don't touch this woman, like, let them go, let them be, they're very special, God's watching over them, etc. So this is clearly not the first time.
But
yeah,
Abimelech is higher in status than his service.
Yes.
And Yehuda thought that Joseph was like Pharaoh.
Oh, so one is speaking down and one is speaking up.
He's speaking
Okay.
personally to someone who's
Good. I like that. So that's a distinction. Good. All right. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. The next example that we have of someone speaking into someone else's ear is text 2b. This is from Bereshis, from Genesis chapter 23. So 3 chapters later. And again, I mentioned this a few moments ago, when Avram is purchasing a plot of land to bury his wife. Toba, please read this one as well.
And he spoke to Ephron into the ears of the people of the land.
Again, that same turn of phrase, he spoke in the ears of the people of the land, speaking into their ears. Now, what is the implication over here? The implication is that Avram is speaking to the people, and basically he was wheeling and dealing and negotiating a purchase of the land. He wanted the land. They said, you have to speak with Ephron. And so he says to Ephron, I'd like to bury my wife. Can I bury her here? He says, sure, you can take it. Avram says, no, I don't want to take it. I want to pay for it. and then they were negotiating, and the Torah says that Avram of all the people, ostensibly because he wanted it to be a known thing. He wanted it to be above board, completely transparent. It's like blockchain. It's like crypto. He wanted this to be like cryptocurrency. Everyone can view the blockchain, right? It's transparent. This is not under the table transaction. This is, he spoke into the ears of the people that were around him. Bottom line is, oh, and in that narrative of Avram, Ephron, Ma'arat HaMachpelah, Hebron, land for burial, etc., 3 times it mentions that he spoke into their ears. So the idea of speaking into someone's ear has already been stated 4 times prior. Number 1, Avimelech to his servants, and number 2, 3, and 4, Avram to the locals when he's purchasing the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. And now for the 5th time, the Torah says, that Yehuda says, I want to make sure I get this quote right. He says, I want to speak davar ba'aznei Adoni, a matter into my master's ears. And suddenly Rashi pipes up. What does it mean to speak into someone's ear? May my words enter your ears. What's going on here? We already had this 4 times, and Rashi never commented once. Suddenly here we don't know what it means to speak into someone's ear. 4 times before in Torah, we talk about speaking into someone's ear, and not once does Rashi feel the need that we need to explain it. Suddenly he's like, oh, if you're wondering what it means to speak in someone's ear, it means that you want it to enter their ear. First of all, why are you commenting? It makes sense that you never commented before, then why are you commenting here? I have a second question. That's all question number 1. The second question is again one of these technical Rashi questions that at this point, I know we were like a week off, so maybe we're a little rusty. At this point, everybody should get the second question on Rashi. When you look at the header of Rashi, what are Rashi's words that he's quoting in his header for his commentary? And I know, like, again, I'm not sharing this online, but what's the header of Rashi? This is text 1b. There's 5 words that he quotes. Vayigash Elav, and he approached him. Judah approached Joseph. And ... Davar Baznei Adoni, a matter into my master's ears. And Rashi explains, may my word enter your ears. Which word should have Rashi quoted? Which word should he have left off? In his header. Davar Baznei Adoni, he should have quoted. He should have quoted that idea of Yehuda speaking something into his master's ears, and then explain what that means. But why does Rashi quote the words Vayigash Elav? And he approached him. Rashi doesn't explain what Vayigash Elav means.
Maybe it's difficult to approach a king, someone who's above you.
But Rashi is not addressing that as commentary. He's explaining the words. What does it mean? A matter into my master's ears. May my words enter your ears. That's that. He's only commenting, it seems, on the idea that he's speaking into his ear, but not Vayigash Elav, not in his approach. So why does Rashi quote in his header the words that say that he approached? Why is that relevant? Now the truth is, as we'll see soon, it's those words Vayigash Elav that necessitate Rashi's commentary. In other words, one question answers the other, and I'm going to try to lay this out in a way that is as clear and as simple as possible. So here we go. At the end of last week's Torah portion, there was a dialogue already between Yehuda and Yosef. Yosef, again, they don't know he's Yosef, but I'm just going to use his real name. Yosef says, we're going to throw this guy in prison. Benjamin, he stole the cup. He's a goner. That's it. You guys go home. Go back to your dad. Have a great time. Take the food. Enjoy. Here's 2 tickets. Here's 10 tickets to Disney also. Knock yourselves out. Benjamin stole the cup. He's not going anywhere. Yehuda says, no, you got it wrong. We'll all be your servants. We'll all be slaves. Yehuda starts negotiating already at the end of last week's Torah portion. Comes along this week's Torah portion, and we know that the Torah portions were divided in a very special way. They were like already in the times of Moses and Moshe Rabbeinu, they already divided. So comes along this ultimate cliffhanger, right? And the next Torah portion opens, Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda approaches. Approaches. He was already talking to him. What do you mean he approaches? Oh, comes along the Arachaim, I think. Let's see this text. Text number 3. Yeah, the Arachaim HaKadosh. Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar, a great mystic and commentary on the Torah. I'm going to read this one. We need to clarify, he asks, why does the Torah tell us that Yehuda approached Joseph if he was already in close proximity to him, considering that they had already been conversing? Again, at the end of last week's Torah portion, they were already having a conversation. So why does this Torah portion begin? Vayigash elav Yehuda, and he approaches him. What do you mean he approaches him? So he explains it very simply. It is well known that kings are customarily accompanied by their high-ranking courtiers, maybe ministers and advisors. When people are granted an audience with a king, they are not invited to advance past the high-ranking ministers and stand directly before the king. Rather, they stand beyond the circle of royal advisors and address the king from there. This is how Judah addressed Joseph until this point. Then he approached Joseph, meaning he stepped past the station and stood between the king and his ministers so that only the king would hear his words. And with this, the Arachaim explains something fascinating. He explains that physically, there was a physical approach that took place. Basically, you have the king sitting in his throne, and then you have the advisors, and then you're outside the perimeter. You're like outside the 3-point line, and you're saying, King, Your Majesty, my petition. At this point, Yehuda has the chutzpah, essentially, to walk directly up to the king. Vayigash, or to the second in command. Vayigash elav Yehuda, our Torah portion says, Vayigash elav Yehuda, he approaches him. This is what triggers Rashi's question. A question that we didn't realize until this second. What's Rashi's question? Why does he approach him? What's he approaching him for? You can't have a conversation from where you are. Why are you approaching? What's the answer that Rashi explains? The answer is a few words later, Yehuda himself explains why he's approaching. Because he wants to tell him davar ba'ozne adoini. He wants to tell him something in his ear. What does that mean? Not just that it's private, but more importantly than private, he wants to tell him something that he is going to really listen to. This is not going to be a request that I ask from outside the perimeter. This is not a Steph Curry request. Steph Curry is awesome. But this is not a Steph Curry 3-point request. This is not a half-court request. This is I need access. I need to have a very heart-to-heart conversation and a very serious conversation with you. This is why Rashi never addressed the turn of phrase, speaking into the ears of someone before up until now. Because every time, and I'm going to explain this in a second, every time the Torah used that phrase before, it meant something else. This is the first time it means this. Let me explain. The first instance, we quoted this before, the first instance that we find that phrase, speak to the ears of the people, is when Avimelech, the king, is told by God, let her go, let Sarah go, do not touch her, do not touch Abraham, they're special people, otherwise you're in trouble. The next morning, Avimelech gathers his servants and says, guys, listen up, no one mess with them. He tells it to them in their ears. Why? For a different reason. Because in that case, there was more than one person. When you're dealing with more than one person, it makes sense that you say, listen up, right? You have a crowd assembled. Everyone's talking. You get attention. You clank your glass. You're right. Hear ye, hear ye. You're in a group of people. You have to get people's attention. So you speak into their ears, meaning you're getting a collective attention. Likewise, when Abraham is purchasing, wheeling and dealing, negotiating to purchase the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave Machpelah, and he doesn't only want to deal with Ephron, because like I told you, he wanted to blockchain this. He wanted to make sure that this is a public record. Anyone can look up this sale. It's going to be recorded in the county ledger. This is not a private sale. This is going to be ba'aznei b'nei chet. This is going to be in the ears of all the people, the populace. Again, it was in their ears, meaning listen up, or he was getting a collective attention. But that doesn't make sense when you're standing in front of one person. When you're dealing with a multitude of people, and it says that one person spoke to their ears, what that means is he got all of their attention. But when you have a one-on-one conversation, why would you use that phrase of speaking to the ear of the person? Who else are you speaking with? There's only one person there. You understand why Rashi now has a question. Again, I'm just gonna rewind that and do that one more time. Every other time the Torah uses the phrase speaking to the ears of the people, it's always talking about a group of people that need to be listening. So you tell a group, guys, listen up. I have an announcement to make. Shh, everyone stop talking, listen up. Speak to the ears of the people means you make sure that everyone's listening. But when you have Vayigash Elav Yehuda, like the Or HaChaim just said, he's not standing with a perimeter of people. He now approaches the viceroy. He approaches Yosef, and they're speaking face to face, nose to nose. So why is he telling him, I want to speak to your ear? Speak to your ear. I'm all ears. Like, I'm the only one around. You're not speaking to everybody. You're speaking just to me. That's why Rashi has to explain what's going on. In this case, it wasn't gaining collective attention like it always means. In this case, it was, I need you to really listen to what I'm saying. In those other cases, that's not what it meant. It didn't mean, I need you to really listen. It meant, I want you all to listen. In this case, there's no all, but it's you, one-on-one. I need you to listen. Not just to listen, to understand what I'm saying. And what's he saying? I'm not leaving without my brother. It's not happening. I need you to really understand that. You ever have conversations like that? Or you ever have a situation where you're not having, it's not a typical conversation. This is it's kind of a tough conversation. It's like, I really need you to listen to what I'm saying. Like, I need you to not only hear, but to really listen. In Yiddish, we actually have a text about this. There's her, which means listen, and then there's der her, which is to, you know what? Let's read the text. It's a fascinating text. Take a look at text number 4. I'll read this. A chassid is this is coming from the talks of the previous Rebbe, where he speaks about the difference between her or heron and der heron. A chassid is very familiar with what we mean when we say der heron. Just for clarity's sake, before we continue, der her or der heron is deeper than just her or heron. This is not herring, that's a fish. Okay, a chassid is very familiar with what we mean when we say der heron. We once discussed the difference between heron and der heron at length, and he's about to do it again. Heron doesn't mean listening only with one's ears. Listening with one's ears is not really listening. It goes in one ear and out the other. So, in other words, even heron, which is the lower level, is not superficial. Heron is like the phrase, speak for your servant is listening. The meaning of listening is to understand. The brain listens, the intellect listens. It's like the phrase, the ear examines words to understand what we hear. Okay, so that's heron means not just to hear, but to understand. But der heron is very different. It's even deeper than that. It's when the listening ear carries the insight to literally every organ in the body. What that means is you're not just hearing, you're not just understanding, you are integrating. Der heron means it permeates every part of your being. There's no part of you that is outside of this message. So Rashi explains that what Yehuda was telling Yosef is, I need you to do some der heron over here. This is not something that, right, 3 levels. This is not in one ear, out the other. This is not even, I want you to understand what I'm saying. This is, I need you to get it. I need you to get the fact that we cannot go home without our brother. It's untenable. It's not a possibility. It's not on the table. For me, it's not on the table. I need you to understand with the same certainty that I have that it's not on the table. That's not a possibility. Because to you, there's clearly a possibility that Benjamin stays in Egypt. It's not a possibility. I need you to understand that. That's what he's trying to communicate. So again, we've answered all the questions. I know it's kind of the third time, but I want to just make sure we line this up. So point number one, every time in Torah where the Torah, until now, where the Torah used the phrase speaking to the ears of the people, it was always people plural. And what that meant was, since you're speaking to a group, you want to make sure that everyone's paying attention. But that's a basic level, paying attention. Fine. In this case, he's not speaking to a group, he's speaking to one person. And so presumably they're paying attention. So what does it mean that he's speaking to the ears of that person? So that's why Rashi comments. I asked the question before, was why does Rashi even have to comment? Isn't it obvious? No. It's not so obvious. Here he means, I don't only need you to pay attention. I need you to get what I'm saying, to feel what I'm saying. With every ounce, with every fiber, with every atom of your being, you need to get what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is very important. So that explains why Rashi in his header, why he quotes the words Vayigash Yehuda, or Vayigash Elav, that he approached him. Because once he approaches him, then the question is, why does he have to speak to his ear? If he's already there, then it's obvious. So and then why does Rashi comment? So Rashi explains that indeed, why does the Torah have to say that he told him, he's spoken to his ear? If he's one-on-one with him, then that's obvious. And the answer is because he was telling him that I need you to really hear what I'm saying. I'm not just saying something that you can ignore. I'm not saying something that's negotiable. I'm saying something that is demanding your attention and your response in the way that I need you to respond. And this is taken in context of the actual verse itself. As Rashi explains a few words later, when Yehuda in his word says Val Yichar Apcha, take a look at text 5, where he says, don't get mad at me, don't be upset. The Rashi says, from here we discern that Judah spoke forcefully to Joseph. Judah spoke forcefully with Yosef. What does that mean? What do you mean forcefully? Stop. You negotiate me. It's not negotiate me. And you're probably going to meet somewhere in the middle. Now, in the middle, closer to one part or the other, but it's not. What Yehuda was saying is, there's nothing I can give at this point. There's no this going home without detriment. It's not happening. It's and that's what breaks the story. He starts crying. He says, I'm Yosef. He confesses who is the story. So that explains Rashi. Rashi is consistent with his understanding. Rashi understands that there was an approach. Right? Rashi understands the Torah telling us that there's an approach, and not just an approach to have a private conversation, but a serious conversation, a tough conversation, a conversation that Yehuda is demanding action from Yosef, from the viceroy of Egypt, and he's prepared to put his life on the line for that. And so now we get into the part of the lesson where we get some takeaways. There's one of these anecdotes that has been said so many times. When you take your kid to I don't know, Kroger, right? And the kid and your child says, "Oh, hey, can I have candy, chocolate? Oh, we have chocolate here. We have chocolate out on the table, right? Candy, chocolate, ice cream, lollipop, whatever it is, right? Theoretically, let's say there's some candy involved, sweets involved, or whatever, and you say, no, well, it's no, we're not going to have it. It's not good, whatever it is. The kid might press, no, but I really want it, and try to negotiate. What if the kid asks for ice cream? What if you pass by a kosher ice cream store and your kid says, oh, I want ice cream. And you tell your kid, we're fleshik, right? We had a meat meal. That's it. Conversation's over. Why is it like that? It's very simple. It's like that because the child knows there's no negotiations when it comes to kosher. It's kosher is kosher, and it's not kosher, not kosher. Like they're not going to press. Oh, but like I always tell this story. I'm sure you've heard me tell this story. Oh, as a kid, growing up in Pittsburgh, Murray Avenue was the main drag on Squirrel Hill. That was the community, the Jewish community over there. Remember, I once went into a store, newsstand. They sold like drinks and snacks and whatever it was, and I'm looking in the refrigerator. I'm taking out drinks to look for the hechsher, for the kosher symbol. The guy looks at me. He's like, "What are you looking at?" I'm like, "I'm looking to see if it's kosher." He looks around the store. There's no one else in the store. He's like, I won't tell anyone. And I'm like, okay, that's not exactly how it works. Some things are just non-negotiable. When another party knows that it's negotiable, guess what? They're going to negotiate. When they know there's nothing to talk about, then they're not going to negotiate. Or maybe they'll try a few times and then stop. You know where the Rebbe spoke about this a lot? This idea of don't open yourself up to negotiation. I'm sure you can figure this out with regards to
Israel.
with regard to Israel.
Giving up
The
land.
moment you put negotiations on the table, maybe we'll get back Jerusalem. Maybe. The moment you do that, then it's never going to end. Like, where does it actually end? It's like there's always more. You can always negotiate more, especially if you're speaking about giving away something tangible for something intangible. We'll give away tangible land, tangible, like an actual thing for a handshake, a promise, a good faith effort, someone who may not be from someone who may not be in charge tomorrow. Like, what's the actual game plan? But aside from the details of Land for Peace, which is a larger topic, and we did a seminar on that months ago. But aside for that specific thing, there's a general concept here. The general concept is when you approach a conversation from a posture of negotiation, then it's one conversation. When you approach it from a position of, look, this is not on the table, right? I'm just trying to convey that it's not on the table. That's our conversation. Then it's a completely different conversation. Then there's also a sense of respect because you're clear on what your boundaries are. You're clear on what's what. And yes, there might be some places where you're open to negotiate, but in this, there's a line and you're not going to negotiate. Again, using the example of the sweets versus the ice cream, the dairy ice cream. Yeah, one is conceptually negotiable. You know why? Because sometimes you'll tell the kid, fine, this time, sure, you can have the lollipop, fine, right? But when it comes to kosher, the answer is going to be no. You're not getting the dairy ice cream after we just had, the steaks. It's just not happening. So in that case, it's a much stronger position. This is true also in so many areas of life. And really the question is, when it comes to conversations,
actually doing a course. What vehicle to go in?
really what it comes down to is this. What it comes down to is asking ourselves the question, when it comes to a conversation, what's our position? How sure are we of our position? How strong are we of our position? It doesn't mean, I'm not suggesting tonight that every conversation that you should be so obstinate and ungiving and unyielding that everything has to be your way and it can't be anything else. And you're never open to negotiation. That's not actually healthy. But what I am suggesting is that when your brother is in danger, at that point, it becomes non-negotiable. When your brother, and I mean this euphemistically also, not literally, right? When your brother is in danger, when that man standing in front of you is holding your brother captive, negotiations become obsolete. At that point, it's here's what's what, here's what's going to happen. We are going to take back our brother. There is no possibility that we're going home to our father with 10 brothers, 2 of them are gone. We tried our best. It's not an option. We're not going home without Benjamin. Everyone, I'm giving free license to apply this as you want to 2025, to what's going on right now. But I'll just say this. When your brother is being held, negotiations, you got to come with an absolute. You got to come with an absolute, right? This is it. This is the reality. We're not going home without our brother. Let's read some text. I think it's important to read text, and we'll see how the Rebbe formulates this in a way that only he can. Text number 6. Take a look. So long as we are dealing with shallow concerns, monetary profits, and the like, we approach the matter rationally and determine the most effective way to address it. What that means is you can negotiate when it comes to money things, when it comes to finances. You make a deal. When we deal with the matter of his soul is tied to his soul. In other words, the father's soul is tied to the son's soul, Jacob and Benjamin, something that endangers the lives of Benjamin and his aged father, Jacob. We don't make rational determinations about the best approach. We begin by making a tumult. As the saying goes, wow, look at this. As the saying goes, one screams when it hurts. As is tutve Schreitman. If you're being hurt, you scream. If you're not screaming, it means that what's happening? How are you not screaming? In other words, what the Rebbe is explaining is when Yehuda approaches Yosef, he says, formalities are gone. I'm no longer standing outside the perimeter. I'm going to walk right to you. I didn't ask for permission. I'm going to walk over to you and I'm going to make a lot of noise and I'm going to tell you what's what. Daber ba'aznei Adonai. I'm going to speak, or davar. I'm going to speak into your ear. In other words, I need you to hear what I'm saying. No negotiation. No, we're not going back and forth on this. I'm telling you what's going to happen. We are not leaving without our brother. Let's do some more text. Text number 7. Text number 7. In these matters, when it comes to important things, strong words convince the listener that the matter is truly existential. We are not concerned with money, prestige, power, and the like. In other words, it's survival here. This approach results in, may my words enter your ears. When we begin with a tumult, bang on the table, and I don't know how to pronounce it, eshu?
Yeah.
Issue?
Avoid.
Issue? Yeah, diplomatic niceties. Others realize that this is truly an existential matter for us. This convinces them to concede and grant their demands. Eventually, they come around to our perspective and grant it happily and willingly. I guess I should say halavai that should happen. But we have to approach with strength, right? We have to look at it. A tumult, bang on the table. Diplomatic niceties can wait because right now this is too important. Text number 8. This is from a video that's titled "The Rebbe on How to Handle a U.S. Secretary of State."
Do you know what year this was?
I don't know the year. I didn't look up the video, but that sounds fascinating. Here's a transcript. The solution to these unpleasant situations is the opposite of what was done until now. Up until now, the approach has been to compromise on vital issues, not just minor ones, to receive something in return. We open negotiations by insisting that the subject at hand is a matter of survival. But since we are alone among 70 nations, we feel we have no choice but to compromise. The problem is that once we make concessions, it is impossible to find the point at which compromises must end. And I just want to pause here for a moment. And we see this in so many cases in life. It's like the moment you move your red line, then there's no red line. You come out, and this is true, like, again, the Rebbe was speaking about Israel. That's specifically about Israel. Like, no, this is a red line. And then, okay, and then 10 minutes later, it's like, but maybe we can also compromise on that. So then you're just not taken seriously. The only approach that has worked with the United States until now has been to stand firmly and explain that it is not about stubbornness, but a matter of survival. When Israel tells the United States that its position is not just it wants more of this, it wants to improve this, it wants to have more leverage here, but it's about survival, it's an existential conversation, then it's a different conversation. If you're not dealing with negotiation, if you're not dealing with, better or worse, whatever, if it's about existential survival, then that becomes a different conversation. And that's the conversation, again, modeled in this week's Torah portion between Yehuda and Yosef. I think we have one more text, and this is about how to communicate with our kids. And obviously, this is in the areas that are very important. Here we go, text number 9. We must make an immediate tumult and with great alacrity to save our children from an education and behaviors that were prevalent in Egypt, an education that is opposite to that of the Torah, one that leads to assimilation, which imperils their spiritual life. This approach yields the results that were achieved when Judah approached Joseph. Because Judah began by making a tumult, Jacob's family did not suffer slavery until much later. On the contrary, the best of the land for Judah, get our children to know precisely Jacob are meant to behave, even because a lot of things happen in that. But basically, it's some values, and then hopefully no guarantees in life, but in how important those are, hopefully that their ears, it will be very, very important. Because of their make sense?
Rabbi, for those of us online, we haven't heard the last 3 or 4 minutes of what you've said.
Again. But how many times, hey guys, hopefully it'll last another minute or two. How many times Israel, right, make a lot of noise, but then say, actually, we're going all the way. This time we're going all the way, right? This time we're not going to stop until X, Y, or Z defeated. Then it's like, but we're open to negotiating. It's like, listen, again, I'm not saying I'm not pasquing. I'm not ruling on Israeli policy right now. I'm just saying that if something is really important, you got to come with that position. If it's important, then come at it as important. Don't come at it as we're open to negotiating. By the way, I saw somebody in the chat. David wrote a very good question. Maybe we can crowdsource this question. What do you guys think? What language was Judah speaking to Joseph? At this point, he didn't know that Joseph spoke Hebrew, and there was someone translating, right? Which is correct. It says that there was always a translator between them. Literally, last week's Torah portion said that the brothers didn't realize that Joseph could understand their private conversation because there was a translator between them. So what Judah taught Joseph face to face? Is there still a translator? That break out into some Egyptian that he picked up from Duolingo, right? A joke about Duolingo. He Does he just speak in Hebrew and hope that it's, I don't know. It's a very good question. We have to look that up. Very good question. David, good. You stumped the rabbis. There you go. We have to look into that. All right, what's the moral of the story? Be strong, be secure, right? Be confident, and be the one to not be afraid to tell the truth. That's what it comes down to. And when it comes to education, we should teach our kids what's important should be important. And for ourselves, what's important should be important. All right, make sense? Good. All right, we're back next week on Tuesday night, hopefully with stable internet. I'm working now on a hotspot. That's the problem. The internet's down in the building for whatever reason, so I'm working on a hotspot, and my hotspot is not so stable either, apparently. So that's what's going
The
on.
wind knocks out the.
Yeah, there's whenever a storm
did
happens,
yesterday.
yeah, whenever something goes awry and with the internet over here, which is, it just is what it is. I know in advance, but this is working to some extent. So your patience with that. Next week we are back. We are on back to today. Can I this for a second? This is very important. I want to invite everybody and encourage everybody to participate. We're expecting a very nice crowd for this. Yeah, this is going to be amazing. We have one of the NIH directors. You know, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, plural, is a collection of institutes. I found out, you know, not experts on this stuff, but I found out that there are multiple institutes of the NIH, and Dr. Eric Green is one of the heads.
Is he someone from Atlanta?
He lives in Washington. He literally works for the NIH, and he's the head of the National Human Genome Research Institute. And he'll be speaking about personalized medicine, the future of medicine, and we'll be asking him about some of the ethical considerations of that and how we can approach some of these new frontiers in medicine. So we have he's going to give a fascinating background, the science. This is good for doctors and for everybody. And we're going to get into yes, there was an interpreter, correct. The question when he approached, you're saying even when he approached, it was an interpreter? Okay. Well, there you go. We won't need an interpreter for this guy. He is incredible, and it's going to be amazing. We are also launching the Jewish Medical Society of Georgia, which is a platform, a space to bring together medical professionals, Jewish medical professionals in the state for events, lectures, lunch and learns, creating a WhatsApp group where people can ask questions of a halachic nature when the questions arise. A lot of incredible utilities. So if you know anyone in the medical field around the state of Georgia, if you know anyone that is in science, technology, futurism, the future of life, anyone who likes health and wellness, anyone who's curious in general, please come out Wednesday, January 15th, cocktail reception, 7 p.m. Event program starts at 8 p.m. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. They are going to finally release the information about the course. It's going to happen. It's going to start. We're clarifying. I know. We're clarifying that. Stay tuned for the final details. The final details will come out in the next few days.
Okay.
That we have the title. It's called Demystifying Tanya with none other than Rabbi Tzvi Freeman, who is writing the book. Well, he didn't write the original. He's writing the new book, the new translation of Tanya, that it's going to be,